Straight to the top story at this hour, and a major development. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now said that he would not resign despite being charged with bribery, fraud and the breach of trust in a corruption scandal. The incumbent Prime Minister has denounced the charges as an attempted coup. This is the first time in Israel's history a sitting Prime Minister is accused of bribery.
כי הערב אנחנו עדים לניסיון של הפיכה שלטונית נגד ראש ממשלה בעלילות שווא ובתהליך חקירות מזוהם ומגמתי. אני לא אתן לשקר לנצח. אני אמשיך להוביל את המדינה לפי החוק, בדיוק כפי שכתוב. אמשיך להוביל את המדינה באחריות, במסירות, תוך דאגה לביטחון ולעתיד של כולנו.
Earlier, the country's Attorney General has charged Netanyahu with corruption, bribery, fraud and the breach of trust. The indictment comes after a 4-day hearing with Netanyahu's defense team last month, followed by the week of intensive discussions at the Attorney General's offices.
היום הזה הוא יום קשה ועצוב. היום הודעתי לבאי כוחו של ראש הממשלה, מר בנימין נתניהו, על החלטתי להעמידו לדין בכתב אישום הכולל 3 אישומים. יום שבו היועץ המשפטי לממשלה מחליט על הגשת כתב אישום נגד ראש ממשלה מכהן בגין עבירות חמורות של שחיתות שלטונית, הוא יום קשה ועצוב מבחינת הציבור בישראל ומבחינתי באופן אישי.
Israeli law does not require Netanyahu to step down from the post of Prime Minister if indicted. The entire process of an indictment and trial could take 2 years. As Prime Minister, he would only be forced to resign from the post if he is eventually convicted, where he could face up to 10 years in prison and or a fine for bribery charges alone, while fraud and breach of trust carry a prison sentence of up to 3 years. Listen in to what our West Asia Bureau Chief Daniel Pagani has to say on the story.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, at the end of the game, was indicted for 3 different cases for bribery, corruption and breach of trust. And this is an indictment that is extremely heavy in political terms. It might as well be considered his political death sentence. First of all, he is the first Israeli Prime Minister in the entire history of the country of being indicted while in office. There is no law that forces him to resign. He can, in theory, remain in office. But the problem is that Israel, as a country, is heading towards a 3rd round of elections. And, first of all, he will have a harder time to convince his voters, the right-wing voters, that he is actually innocent and he is actually clean. Many of the right-wing Israelis do trust the rule of law. They do trust the Attorney General, and they do not want to have an indicted Prime Minister. Also, they fear that he will spend more time defending himself than actually taking care of the country. Also, other political leaders of minor political parties will find it very difficult to support the candidacy of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Maybe one day at the end of this trial he could land in jail, and there is no political party who wants its name as one of the supporters of a Prime Minister who at the end of the game ended up in jail. So who benefits the most out of this case? Well, certainly Benny Gantz, the main rival that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has had. From the beginning, he repeated multiple times that he was the only clean and legal alternative to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He said he wanted to bring fresh energies into the Israeli political arena, to change things, to get out of the parliament all the corrupt. And well, facts are actually proving him right. And in terms of perception, he will definitely gather a lot of voters behind this sort of always proclaimed integrity that he has had. But there is also Avigdor Lieberman, the former defense minister under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was perceived as the kingmaker or the kingslayer. He decided to remain neutral. He decided not to forge an alliance with Netanyahu and then not to forge an alliance with Benny Gantz. Probably he knew that something was happening, and now, since he's on the right wing, he can definitely convince many of the voters who once voted for Benjamin Netanyahu to join him. So he can actually do very good in the next round of elections. What does this mean for the Likud, the historical right-wing parties that was led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where they now remain orphaned, and perhaps a war will start within its ranks because they know that they do not stand a chance with Netanyahu as a leader, so many other politicians, many other ambitious politicians sitting inside the Likud have already started talking about primaries, talking about a change of leadership. So it is clear that this indictment, despite it does not force the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to resign, will be perhaps his political end. Daniele Pagani, reporting from Jordan for Wion, World is One.
And earlier we spoke to Jotam Confino, a journalist from I-24 News, on what's the future of the Likud party. Listen now.
It's quite interesting when we're talking about Likud and especially about Netanyahu, because the past two elections we've seen that most of the voters for Likud, they don't really seem to abandon him or abandon Likud. Even when we had an announcement by the Attorney General back in April that he had the intention of charging Netanyahu with bribery and breach of trust. That alone didn't make any of the Likud voters run away from him, so to say. They stick with him to the end. They see him as the only leader. So if the past two elections are any indication, Netanyahu will not lose any support among the voters. What we can see, however, is a Likud party that simply has had enough, that they will try to oust him from power. We already have the first Likud member who said openly yesterday that he's ready to challenge him. And we have another Likud member saying he was ready to support this man, and this man is Gideon Saar. He's a very high-ranking Likud member. So we have the first signs of Likud party members smelling blood, and this is not a good sign for Netanyahu.